Zara pressed her palm against the cool metal of the dormitory assignment terminal, her purple-tinted skin glowing faintly under the artificial lighting of the Kepler station's residential sector. The bioscanner hummed softly as it analyzed her genetic markers, cross-referencing them with the station's housing database. As a Volani exchange student, she had expected to room with another member of her species, or at least someone from a similar aquatic world. What she hadn't expected was the message that flashed across the screen in stark yellow letters. Housing assignment, Sector 7, Level 12, Room 3847. Roommate, Marcus Chen, Human, Sol System, Earth. Her gill slits fluttered nervously along her neck as she read the assignment twice, then, a third time. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Academic Exchange Program, having only joined the interstellar community 15 standard years ago. Most species regarded them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They were known for their unpredictable emotional responses, their strange sleep cycles, and their tendency to form intense social bonds at an alarming rate. Zara had never met a human before, though she had heard stories. Her professor back on Volanos Prime had mentioned them during xenobiology lectures, describing them as remarkably adaptable but prone to irrational decision-making. The Kepler station orientation materials had been more diplomatic, simply noting that humans required special accommodation considerations due to their unique biological needs. The corridors of Sector 7 were wider than those in the Volani quarters, she noticed as she made her way to her new room. The gravity was set to standard galactic norm rather than the reduced gravity her people preferred, making each step feel heavier than usual. Her breathing apparatus, a sleek device that supplemented the station's atmosphere with the moisture her lungs required, hummed quietly as it adjusted to the drier air. Room 3847 was at the end of a long hallway lined with identical metallic doors. Zara paused outside, her webbed fingers hovering over the access panel. Through the thin walls, she could hear movement inside, along with what sounded like soft music. Taking a deep breath of her humidified air, she pressed her palm to the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a space that was larger than she had anticipated. The room was divided into 2 sleeping areas, each with its own bed, desk, and storage units. What immediately caught her attention, however, was the human occupying the far side of the room. Marcus Chen was sitting cross-legged on his bed, a small stringed instrument in his hands. He was smaller than she had expected, humans being typically shorter than Volani, but there was something about his presence that seemed to fill the space. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he concentrated on the instrument, his fingers moving in precise patterns across the strings. The melody was unlike anything in Volani music, less flowing, more structured, but strangely compelling. He looked up as the door closed behind her, and Zara found herself staring into brown eyes that held an expression she couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, perhaps, mixed with something warmer. "You must be Zara," he said, setting the instrument aside and rising to his feet. "I'm Marcus. Welcome to our humble abode." He gestured around the room with a sweeping motion that seemed both formal and playful. "Yes, I am Zara of the Third Reef, daughter of Coral Singarilan," she replied, giving the traditional Volani introduction. "I greet you with the blessing of deep currents." Marcus blinked, then smiled. "That's beautiful. I'm just Marcus Chen from San Francisco, Earth. I greet you with, He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I don't really have a traditional greeting." "Nice to meet you?" Despite her nervousness, Zara found her gill slits relaxing slightly. There was something disarming about his honesty. "Nice to meet you is sufficient," she said, moving toward her designated sleeping area. "I must admit, I did not expect to be paired with a human." "Same here," Marcus said, settling back onto his bed. "I requested a roommate who might help me understand galactic social customs better. The housing AI must have decided you'd be perfect for that." He picked up his instrument again, though he didn't resume playing. "I hope you don't mind the guitar. I try to keep it quiet, especially during what the schedule says are your people's rest periods." Zara began unpacking her belongings, placing her moisture collection unit on the bedside table and arranging her study materials on the desk. "Guitar," she repeated, testing the word. "It produces pleasant sounds. Volani music is quite different, we use resonance chambers filled with water to create tones." "I'd love to hear some sometime," Marcus said.
Music is one of those universal languages, right? Even if we do it differently. As the days passed, Zara found herself adjusting to life with a human roommate in ways she hadn't anticipated.
Marcus was considerate about her need for higher humidity, running a small humidifier in their shared space without being asked. He kept his belongings organized and was respectful of her study schedule. But there were peculiarities that she was still learning to navigate. Humans, she discovered, generated significantly more body heat than Villani. Their room was kept warmer than she was used to, and she often found herself adjusting her breathing apparatus to compensate for the increased evaporation rate. Marcus seemed to notice her discomfort and had quietly adjusted the room's temperature settings to something more moderate.
More puzzling was their sleep cycle. Humans slept for extended periods in complete darkness, unlike Villani who dozed intermittently in shallow water chambers. Marcus had explained that humans experienced something called dreams during their sleep, vivid mental experiences that occurred while their bodies were immobile. This concept fascinated and slightly disturbed Zara. The idea of being completely unconscious and vulnerable for hours at a time seemed both dangerous and somehow profound. It was during the third week of their cohabitation that the first real challenge arose. Zara woke from her evening rest period to find Marcus sitting at his desk, staring at a communication tablet with an expression she had learned to recognize as distress. His usual easy demeanor had been replaced by something tenser, and she could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest that indicated elevated breathing. "Marcus," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Is something troubling you?" He looked up, and she saw that his eyes were slightly reddened. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Just got some news from home." He set the tablet aside and rubbed his face with his hands. "My grandmother is sick. Really sick. The doctors don't think she has much time left." Zara felt a flutter of uncertainty. Villani families were structured differently than human ones, with extended kinship networks that diluted individual attachments. But she had studied enough human culture to understand that they formed intense bonds with what they called immediate family. "I am sorry," she said, though the words felt inadequate. "Are you able to return to your homeworld?" Marcus shook his head. "Not really. The semester is just starting, and even if I could get transport, it would take weeks to reach Earth from here. By then." He trailed off, staring at the wall. Zara watched as he struggled with emotions that played across his face in rapid succession. Sadness, frustration, anger, resignation. It was like watching a storm system move across the surface of an ocean, visible and powerful but ultimately beyond control. She found herself moving closer, though she wasn't sure why. "In Villani culture," she said carefully, "we believe that the bonds between individuals transcend physical distance. Perhaps your grandmother feels your care even when you cannot be present." Marcus looked at her with surprise. That's actually really comforting. Thank you." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I keep thinking about all the time I spent away from home, studying for the exchange program qualifications. I could have visited more often." "Regret is a heavy current to swim against," Zara said, using a Villani proverb. "It is better to honor the time that was shared than to mourn the time that was not." Something in Marcus's expression shifted, becoming softer. "Your people have a lot of wisdom about these things." "We have had many centuries to contemplate the nature of loss," Zara replied. "Villani lived for approximately 300 standard years. We have much experience with saying goodbye." Over the following days, Zara watched Marcus navigate his grief while maintaining his academic responsibilities. She was struck by his resilience, the way he could engage fully with his coursework and, then, return to their room to stare at the communication device, hoping for updates from his family. Humans, she realized, had a remarkable capacity for compartmentalization. She also began to notice other aspects of human behavior that intrigued her. Marcus was incredibly social, seeming to collect friends from across the species spectrum with surprising ease. Their room became a regular gathering place for study groups that included Antarans, Zephyrians, and even a crystalline entity that communicated through harmonic frequencies. Marcus had somehow acquired translation software that allowed everyone to participate in conversations, and he had an uncanny ability to find common ground between vastly different perspectives. How do you do it? Zara asked one evening after a particularly diverse study group had departed.
You make it seem effortless, connecting with such different beings. Marcus was cleaning up the scattered data pads and empty beverage containers that were the aftermath of any good study session.
I don't know if I'd call it effortless, he said. I think humans are just naturally curious about others.
We want to understand how different minds work.
But, are you not concerned about misunderstandings? Cultural violations? My people spend years studying proper interaction protocols before engaging with new species.
We probably should be more careful, Marcus admitted. But, I think sometimes you learn more by jumping in and making mistakes than by studying theory. As long as you're genuinely trying to understand and respect others, most beings will give you some grace if you mess up.
Zara considered this philosophy, which was so contrary to everything she had been taught about interspecies relations.
Yet she had watched Marcus navigate potentially awkward situations with species she wouldn't have dared approach, somehow finding ways to bridge gaps that seemed insurmountable. The turning point in their relationship came during the 4th week, when the station experienced a critical system failure in the environmental controls. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and the atmospheric processors began producing air with dangerous chemical imbalances.
Emergency protocols went into effect, and students were confined to their quarters until the engineering teams could resolve the crisis.
For Zara, this was potentially life-threatening. Her breathing apparatus could filter minor atmospheric variations, but the wildly fluctuating oxygen and moisture levels quickly overwhelmed its capacity. She felt her respiratory system beginning to struggle as her gill slits worked overtime to extract what they needed from the increasingly hostile air. Marcus noticed her distress immediately.
Zara? What's wrong?
The air, she managed to say between labored breaths.
My apparatus cannot compensate for these fluctuations.
I need more moisture, more stable atmosphere.
Without hesitation, Marcus sprang into action.
He began filling every available container with water from their small kitchenette, using the unit's steam function to increase humidity levels in their immediate vicinity.
He repositioned his desk fan to create air circulation that helped distribute the moisture more evenly.
Most surprisingly, he retrieved a small camping tent from his storage area. Emergency shelter, he explained as he quickly set it up around her bed.
It's designed to maintain its own microenvironment.
He activated a small atmospheric processor inside the tent, one that he apparently carried for emergencies.
This should help stabilize things until the station's systems come back online.
Inside the improvised shelter, Zara felt her breathing gradually ease as the environment became more hospitable. But what struck her most was that Marcus had given her his emergency equipment without a second thought, equipment that could have kept him safe if their room's life support failed entirely. "Why did you do this?" she asked as he checked the tent's atmospheric readings from outside.
Do what?
Marcus seemed genuinely confused by the question.
Risk your own safety for mine. We have known each other for less than a month.
In Volani culture, such sacrifice is reserved for podmates and offspring. Marcus was quiet for a long moment.
I guess humans don't really think about it that way. If someone needs help and you can provide it, you just do. It's not really about how long you've known them.
But what if your equipment fails? What if you need it for yourself? Then, I'll figure something out when that happens, Marcus said with a shrug. But you needed help right now. Zara stared at him through the clear material of the tent, trying to understand the casual way he had dismissed his own safety. This wasn't bravado or showing off, it was simply how he approached the world. Humans, she was beginning to realize, operated on principles that were both simpler and more complex than she had imagined.
The environmental crisis lasted 18 hours.
During that time, Marcus remained vigilant, monitoring both the tent's systems and the station's emergency broadcasts. He shared his food supplies and entertained her with stories from Earth, describing everything from ocean creatures that bioluminesce like her people to human festivals that celebrated the changing seasons. "You said Volani lived for 300 years, Marcus said during one of their conversations.
What's that like, knowing you have so much time?
It is both a gift and a burden, Zara replied thoughtfully. We have the luxury of patience, of taking decades to make important decisions.
But we also sometimes delay action because we believe there will always be more time. What is it like for humans, with your shorter lifespans? Marcus considered this. I think it makes us more immediate. We know our time is limited, so we tend to act on our impulses more. Sometimes that's reckless, but sometimes it means we don't waste time on things that don't matter. Like helping a roommate you have known for only weeks? Exactly like that, Marcus said with a smile. Life's too short to spend it calculating whether someone deserves your help. When the environmental systems were finally restored, Zara emerged from the tent to find that their room had been transformed. Marcus had repositioned furniture to create better airflow patterns, installed additional humidity sensors, and even acquired some aquatic plants that would help naturally regulate moisture levels. You did all this while I was in the tent, she asked, amazed at the changes. I had a lot of time to think, Marcus said, beginning to pack up the emergency shelter. And I realized that if we're going to be living together, I should probably make sure the environment works for both of us, not just me. That night, Zara lay in her sleeping area listening to the gentle hum of the improved atmospheric systems and the soft sounds of Marcus preparing for his extended human sleep cycle. She found herself thinking about the casual way he had risked his safety for hers, the matter-of-fact manner in which he had modified their shared space to accommodate her needs. Among her people, such gestures would have created formal obligations, ceremonial debts that would need to be acknowledged and, eventually repaid through equally significant acts. But Marcus seemed to expect nothing in return, treating his efforts as simply the normal way roommates should behave. As she drifted into her own rest cycle, Zara realized that she was beginning to understand why humans had been so successful in their rapid integration into galactic society. It wasn't their technology or their adaptability, though both were impressive. It was their tendency to treat strangers as if they might become friends, to offer help without calculating the cost, and to approach the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. She was also beginning to understand that sharing living space with Marcus Chen was going to change her in ways she couldn't yet predict. The thought should have been concerning, but, instead, she found it oddly exciting. For the first time in her life, she was looking forward to the uncertainty of tomorrow. The changes in their living arrangement became more pronounced as the weeks progressed. What had started as simple roommate courtesy evolved into something deeper, though Zara struggled to find the appropriate terms in either Villani or Standard Galactic to describe it. Marcus had begun leaving small offerings on her desk, not gifts in any formal sense, but items he thought might interest her. A piece of music composed by a human who had been inspired by ocean sounds. A data crystal containing Earth's whale songs. A small synthetic crystal that refracted light into patterns similar to the bioluminescent displays her people used for communication. Where do you find these things? Zara asked one morning, examining a curious device that projected three-dimensional images of Earth's ocean depths. The station's cultural exchange archives, Marcus replied, pulling on his jacket for morning classes. I've been researching Villani culture. Did you know that your people's reef cities are considered one of the architectural marvels of the galaxy? Some human engineers are trying to adapt the principles for underwater construction on Earth. Zara felt her gill slits flutter with surprise. You have been studying my people? Well, yeah. If I'm going to be living with someone from an aquatic world, I figured I should understand what that means. Plus, it's fascinating. The way Villani society is organized around water currents and seasonal migrations is completely different from anything on Earth. But why would you need to understand? We are only roommates for one academic term. Marcus paused in the doorway, his expression becoming thoughtful. I guess I just think that if you're sharing your life with someone, even temporarily, you should try to understand their world. It makes everything more meaningful. After he left for his xenobiology seminar, Zara sat in their increasingly comfortable room, considering his words. Sharing your life. Among her people, such a phrase carried significant weight, implying long-term commitment and formal acknowledgement of partnership. But Marcus had said it so casually, as if the concept was natural and obvious. She found herself accessing the station's cultural databases, searching for information about human social customs and relationship structures. What she discovered was both enlightening and confusing. Humans formed something called friendships with remarkable ease, creating emotional bonds that could become intensely meaningful despite lacking formal ceremonial recognition.
They had concepts like found family and chosen family that supplemented their biological relationships. More intriguingly, they had a social construct called roommate relationships that could range from purely functional arrangements to deep, lifelong connections. The determining factor seemed to be compatibility and mutual care rather than any predetermined social protocols. The more she learned about human social structures, the more she began to understand Marcus's behavior. His casual generosity, his genuine interest in her culture, his instinctive response during the environmental crisis, these weren't anomalies but expressions of how humans approached relationships in general. This realization led to a decision that surprised even her. When Marcus returned from his classes that evening, he found Zara sitting cross-legged on her bed with what appeared to be a small water-filled bowl balanced in her lap. "Is that?" Marcus began, recognizing the device from his cultural research. "A Volani resonance chamber," Zara confirmed. "I thought you might like to hear some of our music." She began moving her webbed fingers in complex patterns around the bowl's rim, creating vibrations in the water that produced haunting, melodic tones. The sound seemed to flow in ebb-like tides, building to crescendos that reminded Marcus of whale songs but with a mathematical precision that was distinctly alien. "That's incredible," Marcus said softly, settling onto his own bed to listen. "It's like you're conducting water itself." "In a way, I am," Zara replied, continuing the intricate finger movements. Each pattern creates different harmonic relationships. This particular piece is called Deep Current Lullaby. It's traditionally played for young Volani during their first deep water ceremonies. "What's a deep water ceremony?" Zara's movements slowed, then stopped, the water gradually stilling in the bowl. "It is when young Volani first venture into the deep ocean trenches around our homeworld. It represents the transition from childhood to adolescence, from shallow water thinking to deep water wisdom." "That sounds both terrifying and beautiful," Marcus said. "Were you scared during yours?" "Terrified," Zara admitted with a sound that might have been laughter. "I was smaller than most of my clutchmates and had always preferred the safety of the reef shallows. But the deep currents taught me things that shallow waters never could." "Like what?" Zara considered how to explain concepts that had no direct human equivalent. "The deep teaches patience and the value of pressure. It shows you that there is beauty in darkness and that the strongest currents flow far below the surface turbulence. Most importantly, it teaches you that some journeys must be taken alone, even when you are surrounded by others." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "I think humans have similar concepts, but we usually learn them through different experiences. For us, growing up often means leaving home, sometimes traveling far from family to discover who we are as individuals." "Is that why you came to Kepler Station? To discover who you are?" "Partly," Marcus said. "But also to understand how humans fit into the larger galactic community. We're still so new to all of this. Sometimes I feel like we're children who have suddenly found ourselves in a room full of adults." Zara began another piece on the resonance chamber, this one lighter and more playful. "Perhaps that is why humans adapt so quickly. Children are naturally curious and unafraid to make mistakes. Or maybe we're just too ignorant to know when we should be scared," Marcus said with self-deprecating humor. "No," Zara said firmly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "I have observed you these past weeks, Marcus Chen of Earth. You are not ignorant. You are brave in ways that many older species have forgotten how to be." Their evening conversations became a regular occurrence after that. Marcus would return from his classes to find Zara preparing tea made from seaweed harvested from her homeworld's reefs, or experimenting with atmospheric settings that created the gentle water sounds her people found soothing. In return, he shared music from Earth, teaching her about different human cultures and their various approaches to art and expression. It was during one of these conversations that Zara made a discovery that would fundamentally alter her understanding of her roommate. Marcus had been talking about his grandmother, sharing memories prompted by the daily updates he received from his family. His grandmother's condition had stabilized somewhat, though she remained frail. "She taught me to play guitar," Marcus was saying, absently tuning the instrument. "Said that music was one of the few truly universal languages, something that could connect you to people even when words failed." "She sounds wise," Zara said. "I would like to meet her someday."
Marcus smiled sadly. I think she'd like you. She always said that the best conversations happened when people from different worlds try to understand each other. He began playing a soft melody, something gentle and melancholic. This is a song she used to sing to me when I was young. It's about travelers who find home in unexpected places. As the music filled their room, Zara felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the atmospheric controls. Watching Marcus play, seeing the way his entire being focused on creating something beautiful, she realized that she was witnessing something profound about human nature. Humans, she understood now, processed emotion through creation. Marcus wasn't just playing music, he was transforming his worry and love and homesickness into something that could be shared, something that made the room feel less empty and the distance from Earth less vast. Marcus, she said when the song ended, would you teach me to play? His face lit up with surprise and pleasure. Really? I mean, yes, absolutely. Though I'm not sure how well human finger positions will translate to Volani physiology. They spent the next hour experimenting with different ways Zara could manipulate the guitar strings with her webbed fingers. Her manual dexterity was different from Marcus's but not necessarily inferior. Her fingers could move in ways that allowed for complex harmonic techniques that he found difficult to achieve. Try this chord progression, Marcus suggested, guiding her fingers into position. It's the foundation for hundreds of human songs. Zara attempted the sequence, producing sounds that were recognizable but distinctly altered by her unique finger movements. The resulting music was neither fully human nor Volani but something entirely new. That's beautiful, Marcus said with genuine amazement. It's like hearing a familiar song translated into a language I never knew existed. Perhaps that is what happens when different worlds try to understand each other, Zara suggested. We create something that belongs to neither place but somehow belongs to both. Their music sessions became another regular element of their shared routine. Marcus would teach her human songs while Zara showed him techniques for incorporating water resonance into traditional melodies. They discovered that their different approaches to rhythm and harmony complemented each other in unexpected ways, creating musical conversations that neither could have achieved alone. Other students began to notice the changes in their room's atmosphere. The diverse study groups that gathered there seemed more relaxed, more creative in their problem-solving. The combination of Zara's calming presence and Marcus's infectious enthusiasm created an environment where different species felt safe to express unconventional ideas. You two have something special here, remarked Clara, an Antaran philosophy student who had become a regular visitor. The energy in this space is unlike anywhere else on the station. What do you mean? Zara asked, genuinely curious. Most interspecies living arrangements are functional at best, Clara explained, her crystalline features shifting to indicate thoughtfulness. Beings from different worlds learn to coexist, but rarely do they truly integrate their cultures. You've created something new. Zara glanced at Marcus, who was setting up his guitar for their evening session. We are simply learning from each other. No, Clara said firmly. You are teaching each other. There's a significant difference. Learning is passive absorption of information. Teaching requires understanding, adaptation, and genuine care for the other person's growth. That night, after their friends had departed and Marcus had begun his preparations for sleep, Zara found herself contemplating Clara's words. She realized that somewhere during their weeks together, she had stopped thinking of Marcus as a temporary roommate and had begun thinking of him as something much more significant. Among her people, such relationships developed slowly over decades, carefully negotiated through formal protocols and family approvals. The idea that she could form such a deep connection with an alien being in a matter of weeks should have been disturbing. Instead, she felt a sense of rightness that surprised her with its intensity. Marcus, she said as he settled into his bed for the night, I have been thinking about what Clara said. About us teaching each other? Marcus asked, his voice already growing drowsy. About creating something new. I did not expect that when I came to Kepler Station. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might have already fallen asleep. Then, he spoke, his voice soft in the darkened room. I didn't expect it either. But, I'm glad it happened. These weeks with you have been some of the best of my life. Even though we are so different? Especially because we're so different. You show me ways of thinking and being that I never would have discovered on my own. That's a gift, Zara. As Zara settled into her own rest cycle, she reflected on the concept of gifts. In Volani culture, gifts created obligations and established hierarchies of debt and gratitude. But Marcus seemed to view their entire relationship as a continuous exchange of gifts, with no accounting or expectation of reciprocal value. Perhaps, she thought as she drifted into sleep, that was the most human thing about him. His ability to give freely without calculation, to receive gratefully without shame, and to create beauty from the simple act of trying to understand another being. The next morning brought news that would test the strength of the bond they had built. Marcus received an emergency communication from Earth informing him that his grandmother had taken a turn for the worse. The doctors were recommending that family members who wanted to say goodbye should make arrangements immediately. Zara watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions as he read the message. Pain, determination, frustration, and, finally, a resigned sadness that made her gill slits constrict with sympathy. I have to go, he said simply. I know the timing is terrible with midterm exams coming up, and I know the travel will probably end my exchange semester, but I can't let her go without saying goodbye. Of course you must go, Zara replied without hesitation. Family obligations supersede academic commitments. Marcus looked up at her with surprise. You understand? While Volani family structures are different from human ones, the bonds of care and responsibility are universal. Your grandmother helped shape who you are. Honoring that relationship honors yourself. But, what about our room? Our routines? I know you've gotten used to having me around, and I hate to disrupt your semester. Zara felt something tighten in her chest at the thought of Marcus leaving, but she pushed the feeling aside. Do not concern yourself with my comfort. This is what you must do. Marcus began making arrangements immediately, booking passage on a fast courier ship that would get him to Earth in less than 2 weeks rather than the months it would take via regular transport. The cost would likely consume most of his savings, but he didn't hesitate. As he prepared for departure, packing his belongings and completing emergency academic withdrawal forms, Zara found herself struggling with emotions she had never experienced before. The prospect of losing Marcus felt like losing a part of herself that she hadn't known existed until he helped her discover it. I wish things were different, Marcus said as he sealed his travel case. I wish we had more time. Time is not something we control, Zara replied, though her voice was not as steady as she intended. We can only choose how we use the time we are given. And how do you think we used our time? Marcus asked. Zara considered the question, thinking of all the small moments that had built into something larger. The music lessons, the cultural exchanges, the way Marcus had risked his safety during the environmental crisis, the way she had begun to see the galaxy through human eyes. We used it well, she said finally. We used it to become more than either of us could have been alone. The morning of Marcus's departure arrived too quickly. Zara accompanied him to the station's transport dock, carrying his guitar case while he managed his other luggage. The dock was busy with travelers from across the galaxy, but she felt as if they existed in a bubble of impending separation. Keep the resonance chamber, Marcus said as they waited for his transport to be called. And the plants we got for the room. Maybe they'll help your next roommate understand what you need. I do not want another roommate, Zara said quietly. I want my roommate to return. Marcus set down his bags and took her hands in his, a gesture that should have felt alien but instead felt perfectly natural. I want that too. But I don't know if it'll be possible. The exchange program probably won't let me back in after leaving mid-semester. Then, I will find another way, Zara said with sudden determination. Perhaps I will apply for extended study on Earth. Or perhaps you will apply for advanced xenobiology training on Volanos Prime. You would do that? Leave your homeworld for someone you've only known for a few months? Zara met his eyes, seeing her own reflection in their brown depths. You taught me something important, Marcus Chen. You taught me that some connections transcend the boundaries we think define us. I am not the same Volani who walked into that room weeks ago, and I do not wish to return to being her. Transportation for the Earth courier vessel departing immediately, came the announcement over the station's communication system.
Marcus pulled her into an embrace that felt both desperate and hopeful. "This isn't goodbye," he whispered into her hair. "This is just pause. Until the deep currents bring us together again," Zara whispered back, using a traditional Volani blessing for separated loved ones. As Marcus disappeared into the transport tunnel, Zara stood at the observation window watching the small ship detach from the station and accelerate toward the jump point that would take him back to Earth. She remained there long after the ship's lights had vanished into the starfield, her reflection in the transparent aluminum showing a being who had been fundamentally changed by the simple act of sharing sleeping space with a human. The room felt impossibly empty when she returned to it. Marcus's side was bare except for the plants they had chosen together and a small note he had left on his pillow. "Thank you for teaching me that home isn't a place," it read. "It's the people who help you become who you're meant to be." Zara settled onto her bed, picking up her resonance chamber and beginning to play the piece she had been composing in secret, a musical story about two beings from different worlds who discovered that the space between them was exactly where they belonged. The weeks following Marcus's departure were among the most difficult of Zara's life. The station's housing authority had offered to assign her a new roommate, but she had politely declined, using her accumulated credits to maintain the room solo. She told herself it was to maintain her study environment, but the truth was that she couldn't bear the thought of someone else occupying the space that had become so intimately connected with Marcus. She maintained their established routines with almost ritualistic precision. Every evening, she prepared tea for two, leaving Marcus's cup steaming on his empty desk until it grew cold. She continued their musical practice sessions, playing both parts of their collaborative pieces and working on the composition she had started before his departure. The plants they had chosen together received daily attention, their gentle humming providing a constant reminder of the acoustic environment he had helped create. Her academic performance remained strong, but her professors noticed changes in her demeanor. During xenobiology seminars, she found herself defending human cultural practices with a passion that surprised her classmates. When Professor Keln made dismissive comments about human emotional volatility, Zara responded with detailed explanations of how human emotional expression facilitated rapid social bonding and creative problem-solving. "Miss Zara," Professor Keln said after one particularly spirited defense of human risk-taking behavior, "you speak of humans as if you have conducted extensive field research. Yet your academic records indicate only theoretical study. Sometimes direct observation provides insights that formal research cannot capture," Zara replied carefully. "Humans may appear impulsive, but their actions often demonstrate sophisticated emotional intelligence and social adaptation strategies." "And you have observed this personally?" Zara felt her gill slits flutter with nervousness, but she met the professor's gaze steadily. "Yes. I have observed human behavior in intimate social settings and found it both complex and remarkably effective." After class, her friend Clara approached with an expression of crystalline concern. "You miss him greatly," she observed without preamble. "I miss the intellectual stimulation of our cultural exchanges," Zara said formally. "You miss Marcus," Clara corrected gently. "There is no shame in acknowledging emotional attachment, Zara. What you and Marcus created was beautiful to witness. What we created was temporary. He has returned to his world, and I will complete my studies here. That is the natural order of exchange programs." "Is it? Or is that simply what you tell yourself because the alternative seems impossible?" Zara had no ready answer for that question. That night, alone in their room, she finally allowed herself to access the personal messages Marcus had been sending from Earth. She had been avoiding them, afraid that reading about his life away from Kepler Station would make the separation more painful. The first message was brief and practical, confirming his safe arrival and updating her on his grandmother's condition. But, as she continued reading, she discovered something unexpected. Marcus wasn't just updating her on his personal situation, he was sharing his experience of returning to Earth after months in space, describing how his time at Kepler Station had changed his perspective on his own world. "Everything feels different now," he had written. "The colors seem more muted after the diversity of the station. Human architecture feels constrained after experiencing multi-species design principles. But the strangest thing is how quiet my thoughts are. I didn't realize how much our evening conversations had become part of my internal dialogue until they stopped. Another message described his grandmother's reaction to stories about his alien roommate.
She wants to meet you, Marcus had written.
I showed her some recordings of your music, and she said it reminded her of the ocean symphonies she used to hear during her sailing days. She asked if Villani would be interested in cultural exchange with Earth musicians. The most recent message was longer and more personal.
I've been thinking about what you said before I left, about finding another way. I've been researching human-Villani academic collaboration programs, and I think I found something.
There's a new initiative for joint species research projects, specifically looking at how different evolutionary backgrounds approach problem solving.
If we could get approval for a joint project, I might be able to return to Kepler Station next semester. Would you be interested in exploring that possibility?
Zara stared at the message for a long time, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with atmospheric pressure. Marcus was actively working to find a way back to her. The knowledge filled her with a hope she had been afraid to acknowledge. She began composing a reply immediately, but found herself struggling to find the right words. How could she express the depth of her feelings without violating the careful boundaries of their relationship? How could she tell him that she had been researching similar opportunities, that she had already begun preliminary applications for extended research programs that might allow her to visit Earth? Instead, she focused on the practical aspects of his proposal, researching the joint research initiative and identifying potential project topics that would legitimately require both human and Villani perspectives. By the time she sent her response, she had outlined 3 viable research proposals, each designed to showcase the value of their collaborative approach. Your research initiative is intriguing, she wrote formally. I believe our different cognitive approaches could provide valuable insights into interspecies problem-solving methodologies. I have attached preliminary project outlines for your review. Additionally, I should mention that I have been exploring similar opportunities from this end, including a Villani government program for cultural ambassadors to younger species worlds. She hesitated before adding the final paragraph. I hope your grandmother's health continues to improve. Please tell her that I would be honored to share music with Earth's ocean listeners. Marcus's response came within days, enthusiastic and detailed. Not only had he reviewed her project proposals, but he had already begun the application process for the joint research initiative. More importantly, he had additional news. My grandmother passed peacefully yesterday, he wrote. But before she did, she made me promise something. She said that connections like ours are too rare to let academic bureaucracy or species barriers get in the way. She left me some money specifically to fund whatever it takes to maintain important relationships across the galaxy. Her words. I think she would have liked you very much. Zara felt tears gathering in her eyes as she read about the woman who had helped shape Marcus into the person she had come to care for so deeply. That someone she had never met would encourage their relationship felt like a benediction, a validation of feelings she had been afraid to fully acknowledge. The joint research application process moved faster than either of them had expected. Their unique combination of perspectives and the preliminary work they had already accomplished together made them attractive candidates for the new program. Within 6 weeks, they received preliminary approval for a project studying cross-species collaborative problem-solving in high-stress environments. Were approved for a full academic year, Marcus's excited message reported. I can return to Kepler Station at the start of next semester. That's only 8 weeks away. 8 weeks felt like an eternity, but Zara threw herself into preparing for Marcus's return and their joint research project. She expanded their room's atmospheric systems to accommodate longer working sessions, acquired specialized recording equipment for documenting their collaborative processes, and began developing theoretical frameworks for their research. She also made a decision that surprised her with its boldness. Using her accumulated academic credits and savings, she arranged for a small surprise that she hoped would demonstrate the depth of her feelings without violating the boundaries of their friendship. The day before Marcus's scheduled return, Zara received a package from Volanos Prime containing something she had commissioned during their separation. It was a resonance chamber unlike any traditional Villani instrument, designed specifically for 4 hands rather than 2, with harmonic capabilities that would allow for true musical collaboration between different physiologies. That evening, she sat in their room, listening for the sound of his arrival. When she finally heard familiar footsteps in the hallway, her entire being seemed to vibrate with anticipation. The door opened to reveal Marcus, looking slightly older and more serious than when he had left, but unmistakably himself. "Zara," he said simply, dropping his bags and moving toward her. "Welcome home," she replied, rising to meet him. Their embrace was longer and more intense than their goodbye had been, filled with the relief of reunion and the weight of everything they had learned during their separation. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus looked around the room with amazement. "You've changed things," he observed, noting the additional equipment and the subtle modifications to their shared space. "I have been preparing for our research project," Zara said, then gestured toward the new resonance chamber sitting on her desk. "And I made something for us." Marcus approached the instrument with reverence, immediately recognizing its significance. "Is this a collaborative resonance chamber?" Zara confirmed. "Designed for both human and Volani physiology. I thought perhaps we could create something together that neither of us could accomplish alone." Marcus touched the instrument's surface gently, his expression soft with emotion. "It's beautiful." "But, Zara, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Zara interrupted quietly. "Because during these weeks apart, I realized something important. What we have created together is not just academic collaboration or cultural exchange. It is something new and valuable and worth preserving." Marcus met her eyes, and she saw her own feelings reflected there. "I realized the same thing. Being back on Earth, surrounded by my own species, I felt incomplete. Like I had left part of myself here with you. And I felt as if part of myself had traveled to Earth with you," Zara admitted. "I do not think this is standard roommate behavior." Marcus laughed, a sound that filled the room with warmth and familiarity. "No, I don't think it is. I think this is something much more significant." They spent their first evening back together not as roommates but as acknowledged partners in whatever this relationship had become. They prepared dinner together, sharing stories from their time apart and planning their research project. Most importantly, they experimented with the new resonance chamber, discovering that their musical collaboration had evolved during their separation into something even more sophisticated and beautiful. "Listen to this harmonic progression," Zara said, her fingers creating complex patterns in one half of the chamber while Marcus worked the other side. "I discovered it while practicing alone, but it requires two players to complete the mathematical sequence." The music they created together was unlike anything either species had produced individually. It combined the flowing, tidal rhythms of Volani composition with the structured, emotional progressions of human music, creating something that seemed to capture the essence of their entire relationship. "We should record this," Marcus suggested. "For our research documentation, but also because it's beautiful and should be preserved." "Agreed," Zara said. "Though I think our research will demonstrate something beyond our initial hypothesis." "What do you mean?" Zara considered her words carefully. "We set out to study cross-species collaboration in high-stress environments. But what we have actually discovered is that when different beings commit to understanding each other completely, the result is not just cooperation but transformation. We have become something new." Marcus nodded slowly. "Something that belongs neither to Earth nor to Volano's prime, but somehow belongs to both. And something that could only exist in the space between us," Zara added. "In the place where different worlds meet and learn to create together." Their research project officially began the next week, but they both knew they had been conducting this research from the moment they first shared living space. The formal documentation would take most of the academic year, but the real discovery had already been made. They had learned that humans and Volani were capable of creating bonds that transcended species, that sharing intimate space could lead to the evolution of entirely new forms of relationship, and that the universe was far more connected than either species had previously imagined. More personally, they had learned that home was not a planet or a culture or a set of shared experiences, but a state of being that existed whenever two beings chose to understand each other completely. 6 months later, their research paper would be published to great acclaim in the Journal of Interspecies Relations. Their musical collaborations would be featured in cultural exchanges across 12 worlds. The joint Human-Volani academic program would be expanded based on their success. But, that night, reunited in their shared room on Kepler Station, surrounded by the gentle hum of atmospheric processors and the soft glow of aquatic plants, they were simply two beings from different worlds who had discovered that the space between them was exactly where they belonged. "Zara," Marcus said as they prepared for sleep, their first night together in months, "I want you to know that sharing sleeping space with you changed everything for me." "You changed everything for me." "And, you altered the entire trajectory of my existence," Zara replied softly. "In ways I could never have imagined when I first saw your name on that housing assignment." "Do you think we would have found each other if the station's AI had made different room assignments?" Zara considered the question, thinking about all the small choices and random events that had led to this moment. "I believe," she said finally, "that some connections are strong enough to transcend circumstance. Perhaps we would have met in a classroom, or during a cultural event, or simply by accident in a corridor. But, it might have taken longer," Marcus pointed out. "And, we might not have had the opportunity to really understand each other." "That is true," Zara agreed. "Perhaps the AI's decision was not as random as we thought. Perhaps it recognized something we did not yet know about ourselves. That we were ready to become something new? That we were ready to learn what happens when different worlds decide to share the same space and see what they can build together." As they settled into sleep, the gentle sounds of their shared environment providing a soundtrack to their contentment, both Zara and Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had started as a simple housing assignment had become a transformation that would influence not just their own lives but the future of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. In years to come, their model of patient, respectful, and deeply committed cross-species partnership would inspire thousands of similar relationships across hundreds of worlds. The protocols they developed for navigating cultural differences would become standard training for diplomatic missions. Their musical collaborations would create an entirely new art form that embodied the beauty of unified diversity. But none of that future impact mattered as much as the simple fact that they had found each other, learned to understand each other, and chosen to build something beautiful in the space where their different worlds met. In sharing sleeping space, they had discovered that love in all its forms was indeed a universal language, capable of bridging any gap between worlds, species, or hearts.